Welcome to An Honorable Profession, a podcast giving America hope since 2018. I'm Ryan Coonerty. Along with Debbie Cox Bultan of the New Deal, I'm lucky enough to be your co-host. An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. The New Deal is an organization that supports the next generation of American leaders. From attorneys generals to state senators to mayors to school board members, these are the people that are pushing policies and politics that will respond to climate change, rebuild our economy, address racial injustice, and restore our democracy. These are incredibly talented people who have dedicated themselves to public service when their country and their communities needed it the most. Check out NewDealleaders.org to see what I'm talking about.
Hello, and Honorable Profession listeners. I'm Rachel, the producer of the show, and today we're bringing you another special bonus episode. Our bonus content throughout the month of October features host and New Deal CEO Debbie Cox Bultan in conversation with leaders from across the country as they cover all things elections. We're looking closely at swing states in the presidential race, as well as states with key state legislative races, ballot initiatives, and more. Today, Debbie catches up with Florida House Minority Leader Fentrice Driskell. Leader Driskell talks about Florida's super exciting election cycle, highlighting the state's high-profile Senate race, as well as pivotal ballot measures to legalize marijuana, make school board races partisan, and codify the right to abortion into law. She outlines some of the challenges of getting that measure, Amendment 4, across the finish line, with Governor Ron DeSantis waging his own legally questionable battle on the initiative. She also provides an optimistic outlook on the political future of her state, suggesting that Florida could still very well be considered a purple state rather than a red one. Enjoy and stay tuned for our next bonus episode featuring an update from presidential swing state Nevada.
Fentrice Driskell, welcome to An Honorable Profession.
Thank you for having me.
It's so fun to see you as we are heading down the stretch here. You are sitting in Florida, which has a lot going on, actually. And I want to just, I know you've been at it for a long time. I have to feel like this is the sprint of the marathon, maybe. Is that a fair analogy of like where we are right now? It's been a marathon, but now we are in the sprint. How are you feeling? How are you feeling about people's enthusiasm in Florida? What are you hearing and seeing on the ground there?
Yes, so we definitely are in the sprint part of the marathon, and I feel good. I feel strong. I've got my own race that I'm running. I have an opponent. This is my final cycle running for the House of Representatives, and we're running strong there and continuing to fight to give the people good, fair, accessible representation. And then just generally, I will tell you that the excitement for the top of the ticket is phenomenal. And it really encourages me as somebody who is a down ballot candidate and who's running down ballot races, because that boost is really helpful. As leader, I focus on winning those seats that are on the margins and improving the numbers of Democrats in the Florida House of Representatives. So I feel good about our efforts to end the Republican supermajority and try to bring some balance back to the legislature. So we're not cocky. I feel like we're feeling confident that we'll be able to achieve these goals, and it's a good place to be towards the end of the cycle.
Yeah, that's so. Well, I first have to congratulate you too. You have candidates in every single House district, which is no small feat, I am sure. So congratulations on that. And it's great to hear that you think that there might be some pickups. That is, stopping a supermajority would be a huge accomplishment in Florida for sure. When you're out there knocking on doors, what are people telling you that they're worried about? What's top of mind for them right now?
In Florida, we just suffered 2 back-to-back hurricanes, and we're dealing with storms that are getting stronger and stronger. So people are focused, yes, on hurricane relief, like we're making sure that they get what they need, but it's property insurance and housing costs generally. I mean, Florida has the highest property insurance costs in the country. And then when you're dealing with storms that brought unprecedented flooding, you have many folks who weren't even in a flood zone and got flooded, but maybe they didn't have flood insurance. So it's creating a bit of an insurance crisis. So people definitely want to talk about that. The other issue that's top of mind for Floridians is Amendment 4, and that is our ballot initiative that would protect abortion access in the Constitution. And it's really just about, the language is very simple, very elegant. It's about limiting government interference in personal healthcare decisions, which I'm a big proponent of. I support Amendment 4, and Floridians want to talk about this, not just Democrats. The NPAs, the independents, the Republicans all want to talk about access to abortion as healthcare.
Yeah, that is such. I'm so glad you brought it up, and I wanted to ask you about the amendment. I mean, I think a lot has been made about some of these amendments and what they'll do in terms of driving turnout and driving people to the polls that want to vote for that amendment, and then what that might mean for the top of ticket or maybe even down ballot races too. Do you feel like this is a driving, going to drive turnout come next Tuesday?
I hope it does. I will tell you the thing about ballot initiatives in Florida, I'm not so sure that they've been drivers of turnout, but what they do is they give you a lane to talk to voters about issues that they care about. And
Mm,
that's important too. I feel like
yeah,
particularly on the center left, we get dinged for not having clear messaging. I think our messaging has been very clear that every Floridian deserves the freedom to be healthy, prosperous, and safe, and we continue to fight for that. But when you've got something on the ballot like Amendment 4, that is just perfect because you can knock on a voter's door. People tend to know where they are on the issue, but you can also educate them about Florida's extreme ban that is in place that prohibits that as a choice for most women before they even know that they're pregnant. And it's something that voters are very passionate about, and I think that's a good thing.
yeah. Well, you know that I love your freedom frame. It's something I've heard you talk about a lot. Something that we talk about a lot at New Deal. You and I even had a joint op-ed together talking about the freedoms and making sure that people know that Democrats are on the side of freedom, whether it is freedom of choice or freedom from gun violence or freedom to just love who you want to love or pursue a path for yourself that will make sure that you and your family are going to be prosperous. So I feel like that's kind of been the vice president's closing message, right? I mean, obviously we've got the democracy piece too, but what do you feel like? What do you feel like what she's saying might be resonating in Florida along those lines?
Definitely that freedom frame. Definitely. I mean, Americans cherish freedom. Floridians, I feel like, especially do. That's just been characteristic of who we are as a people. And I think Vice President Harris just packages that up so nicely. And you know what else I think is resonating with voters? In Florida, we've been living with a governor and who's veered definitely towards the extreme, and he's brought the legislature along with him, and they basically rubber stamped every extremist whim that he's have. I mean, this is a state that literally where the governor stood at a press conference and had the audacity to say that slavery conferred a benefit on the enslaved, like the
Yeah,
attacks on African American history, the attacks on the LGBTQ community. So what's happening in Florida is that there is some voter fatigue. People are tired of it. People are tired of it. They want to close the chapter on that. They want to move forward. And I think that's also part of Vice President Harris's messaging that's resonating because a lot of voters are feeling the same way about Donald Trump. And we just want to be able to move forward into an America that perhaps is working its hardest to live up to our ideals and not really demonizing our neighbors and people who may come to us, may immigrate from other countries. Like folks are looking for something more positive.
yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I love the turn the page language that she uses, and that you just echoed there. So I hate to bring us negative, but I'm going to have to do it. I mean, we're talking right after this crazy rally that the former president had in at Madison Square Garden. I mean, we could spend 4 hours like dissecting how many terrible things were said by so many people at that rally, but I will focus on the comments about Puerto Rico because I know you have a lot of Puerto Rican voters in your state. I think 800,000 or something, or at least eligible to vote. Do you feel like some of that messaging is, to your point about that, if that's what voters want, are they hearing what's happening on that side? Is that coming? Are his closing arguments, which are to me are getting more extreme, more divisive, more hate filled? Is that breaking through to voters? Do you feel like on the ground? Do they know that?
I think that the people who are with him, and there's
Mm,
not much you can do to move those folks. But I think there's a lot of folks who are undecided or who are perhaps more moderate and who are being turned off by that type of rhetoric. This is purely anecdotal, but I can't tell you the number of conversations that I've had with folks who identify as Republican, they're registered as Republicans, and they tell me they cannot bring themselves to vote for Donald Trump because of
yeah,
what he stands for, how he's moving, the things that he allows around him. And so I have to imagine that a rally like that, yeah, sure, it's going to stoke his base, but it's also going to drive some people away from him because it was such an abhorrent thing that he said. And I'll tell you what I think is resonating. I mean, I condemned those remarks in the strongest terms. We've got a great candidate who is of Puerto Rican heritage, who is running in one of our battleground races, who is standing up for her community and making sure that folks know that this will not stand. The Democratic Hispanic Caucus came out really strong. So there's a counter narrative that I hope and that I think is resonating with people all around the state, with credible messengers. And that's what I think is going to land the most.
Yeah, I hope you're right. And I mean, I did notice that your U.S. Senator Rick Scott tried to distance himself from those remarks, and so that to me shows that they know that those remarks are probably not the best political closing message. What do you think about your U.S. Senate race? I mean, I know some people put it on the list of to watch races with Congresswoman. What are you seeing? What do you feel like might happen there?
Listen, Debbie Merkelsel-Powell is a strong champion and so well equipped to take on Rick Scott. She is unafraid to hold him accountable. And I think particularly with us having Amendment 4 on the ballot, and you've got Vice President Harris at the top of the ticket, it's just such a strong through line, I think, to help drive some of that support towards Debbie Merkelsel-Powell, or she likes to go by DMP, don't mess with my people, is what she
Oh, I
says it
like
stands
that.
for. Isn't that great? I know.
Didn't know that. I love that.
I mean, and then you think about Rick Scott, right? Like, how did he make his fortune? It was defrauding public health care programs. It was with our own tax dollars. This is a man who has wanted to get rid of Medicare. And this is a man who has stood beside Donald Trump. So he can try to distance himself from those comments, but we know that these are the types of things that Trump allows around him. He has fostered this environment. In fact, he has nurtured this environment. He's brought this environment about. So I don't know how far Rick Scott can really credibly try to distance himself from this monster that is Donald Trump.
Yeah. Gee, it's just completely out of curiosity. I mean, you had your governor run for president, obviously. Talked about Trump as somebody that needed to be beaten at that point. But he has also doubled down on the extremism in Florida. I'm just curious, like, how has some of that played out? Is he still, is he still a popular governor? Has he lost any of his popularity? Will that have any impact in this election this time around?
Yeah, so this is a governor who has lost some popularity, and we've seen some vulnerabilities. There was a big snafu over the summer where there was a report put out. It's not funny, but there was a report put out by, I think it was, I forget, one of the state agencies. I think it was the Department of Environmental Protection, and it was a plan to get this, Debbie, to redevelop our state parks for commercial purposes. So to have like hotels and like pickleball courts and all of these things, and people all around the state, Democrats, no party affiliates, Republicans, like it was an outcry, like saying, hey man, what are you doing? This is not what we want. This is not who we are as Floridians. He had prominent members of his own party openly criticize him. And that's when we knew, okay, it seems like there's blood in the water here. He's definitely lost some of his shine. So we're starting to see it. But folks also may not know that the governor has taken to using state dollars to fight back against Amendment 4 and to spread a lot of misinformation about it, and using the state websites and resources to do it. So, he's still veering towards the extremism, unfortunately.
Is that even legal?
I would tell you that it's not, and I could point to some statutes that suggest that it's not. But there was a Supreme Court case, or there was a case about it, and unfortunately, it was decided in the governor's favor. So there's been nothing to stop him from engaging in this bad behavior.
Okay, interesting. While we're on the subject of ballot initiatives, you have a couple other ones that struck my eye. Obviously, you've got a legalizing marijuana. Didn't know again if that's something that people are excited to come out for or against, or if that's going to play statewide. And then also you've got a couple on your ballot there that are democracy related, and really I don't know much about either, so you tell me. But I think there's two, right? One that would make all school board elections partisan, which I wasn't quite sure what to make of that, and then also another one to do away with your public financing of campaigns, if I got that right. I'm just curious kind of about I'm sitting in California. I am also, I just did my own ballot, and, we had 10 initiatives to wade through, and some of them are really complicated. So what are you hearing about kind of what's piquing people's interest right now on the initiative front?
Yeah, I would definitely say folks talk the most about Amendment 3, which is the legalization of marijuana for adult use, and Amendment 4, which is keeping government out of healthcare decisions. With Amendment 3, it's been amazing because there's been a lot of bipartisan support for this. There was even an ad with a Democrat and a Republican senator in the video advocating for Amendment 3 for different reasons, but they said why they support it. And I think that kind of support could be really helpful to getting it across the finish line. So there's a lot of excitement around that. And I think it'd be a good thing for our state, not just financially, but also in terms of decriminalizing the usage of marijuana. There are lots of folks sitting in jail right now, or sitting in prison, I should say, right now, for marijuana charges. And I think it's time that we decriminalize that and, put some regulation around it. The second amendment that you mentioned, there have been very conservative groups that have insinuated their way into school board races, into school board meetings, really have just wreaked havoc here in Florida. I'm talking
Yeah,
about like book bans. I'm talking
yeah.
about school board meetings that become like knockout, drag out sorts of things where really we're supposed to be centered on the best way to educate kids and get them the resources they need. And so this is an outspring of that movement. Proponents of that amendment might say, well, it's good for you to know the political affiliation of somebody who's running, so that it's out in the open. But opponents of that would say, we have like we've watched the school board or the school boards become so politicized. Let's
Yeah.
not, accelerate
And
that.
yeah. No, and I assume that's where it came from, because we are seeing, of course, across the country that kind of, I think that was the whole crazy critical race theory conversation. And then in Florida, you have the book bans and the don't say gay. And there's, so much that for you that's happening in Florida, and then some of the stuff around the country too. So that's kind of what I was thinking. So that is, I feel like, to your point, school boards are a place where you just want people to get together and figure out what's best for the kids. Like feels like they should not be really political, but they have become so political in recent years. So, but let me move to another question for you, which is, you mentioned the hurricanes earlier, and I'm just, all of us around the country have been watching your state, and so, sending so much love. How is that going to impact? Is it, or has it been impacting people's ability to vote? And how are you dealing with that?
So we have really great supervisors of elections here in the state of Florida, and they are all across the political spectrum, but they tend to do a very good job with our elections, regardless of their party. So I really do appreciate them. Finally, we see that the governor has given them some flexibility in terms of what they need to do, whether it's like, trying to find another early voting location because maybe the one they had planned for got flooded out. That's something that's happened here in the Tampa Bay area where I'm in.
Mhm.
By the way, this is like a policy idea that Democrats have pushed for a very long time. So welcome to the party, Governor. We're so glad that you that you finally agreed that we need to remove barriers to voting and make it easier for people to vote. So I think that the pathway has been made clear for voters. If people needed new vote by mail ballots, there's a process for that. So the mechanisms have been in place, and we're hoping that it will not dampen turnout. We're actually seeing really strong turnout in early voting. So I'm optimistic that people will still get the vote out.
Good. And maybe in closing, I can't help but think of, I'm old enough to remember when Florida was really a swing state. It feels like kind of fallen off that list of the states to watch in more recent elections. What do you think it's going to take for Democrats to get back in a position where Florida is either reliably a swing, or maybe even better at some point?
You know what? I don't concede that we're no longer a swing state. We have
That's
been
fair.
performing more as a red state. I will grant you that. But we kind of have a chicken and the egg problem in Florida, where when there's not enough national investment, we're not able to turn out on the center left like we typically would. And then we don't turn out. And so then there's not national investment. And it's like, I really miss having national investment. So I think what we have to do is demonstrate that we can win some things on our own. And this
Mm,
is why I've been fighting so hard to end the Republican supermajority. I mean, first of all, it's just the right thing to do. Supermajorities are not good for government. It's bad. It's like it's not balanced. There's not the push and pull that you want and
yeah.
that you need to lead to the best policy. But second, it should be a part of a national narrative for why investment should come back to Florida. Like, listen, we were able to do this on our own without national investment. There are signs of life here. We're able to break the supermajority using smart programs on the ground where we're registering voters and re-enrolling voters and vote by mail and talking to them, showing that we have really the skills and the competent plans to win, I think will help. And then I think, it matters who you have running at the top of the ticket. So having somebody charismatic to run at the top of the ticket for governor in 2026, I think would help. And stay tuned for that, by the way.
I am going to stay tuned. I'm riveted to that one, actually. But, and I just want to give you grace on that. One of the points you just made, which is you were the victims, frankly, of a terrible redistricting, right? That the governor pushed through. So actually, it's not even really necessarily a reflection of where the voters are if you see what's happening in the legislature. So I think that that's part of the argument to make to the national group is like, look, just because our legislature doesn't look like, that we're in a super minority, or hopefully not after this election. But, part of that was not your fault, actually. Part of that is just really not very fair districts. Just for the record.
That's true. That's true. Even though the people passed through a ballot initiative, a fair districts amendment, we now have a governor who just says, whatever, people.
Yeah, that's not okay. What are you going to be doing in the last week or so here? What does your week look like? What are you going to be doing down the home stretch, and what are you going to be watching on election night?
Yeah, so I circulate in the community. I try to get around to some of these polling locations. My team and I are working not just with our campaign, but with the entire county on get out the vote efforts. That is critical. Meanwhile, I'm also taking care of my candidates who are in our program, making sure they have the resources that they need. I'll be checking in on them in the days ahead. And then election night, I think I'll be glued to my laptop. You can't see my hands, but kind of like this, and clicking refresh.
White knuckled. White knuckled. Yeah, that's right.
But I do have optimism, and I have hope, and I have a quiet confidence about our races. And I believe we will come back with more Democratic seats for the next legislative session. And so we'll see what happens.
All right. Well, we're going to be watching you. Our thoughts are with you for your own race, but also for your colleagues across the state. And thanks for taking a few minutes out to talk to us about what's happening in Florida. We will all be white knuckled with you all evening, sending in solidarity.
Thank you.
An Honorable Profession is a New Deal Leaders podcast. Thanks to the team at NewDEAL for producing this episode. We encourage you to bring honor to public service, and because we keep things honorable, no tax dollars are used in the making of this podcast.
This podcast is part of the Democracy Group,